Kate Morgan knew she was expendable the moment the Varkesh transport ship dumped her at the hatchery gates. No ceremony. No welcome. Just a rough shove from the guard and a door slamming shut behind her, leaving her alone on the landing platform with nothing but her data pad and a single travel bag. The facility sprawled across the asteroid's surface like a metallic infection, all sharp angles and humming force fields that made her teeth ache. The structure looked wrong somehow, built with geometry that human eyes weren't meant to process. Towers jutted at impossible angles. Walkways connected sections that seemed too far apart. Everything pulsed with a sickly blue light that came from within the metal itself. Kate took a breath and immediately regretted it. The air tasted of sulfur and ozone, burning the back of her throat. She coughed, her eyes watering as the recycled atmosphere hit her lungs. This wasn't air meant for humans. This was air for creatures that thrived in hostile environments. She was the foreign object here, the thing that didn't belong. She clutched her data pad tighter, knuckles white. Her credentials as a xenobiologist meant nothing here. Back on Earth, she'd been respected. Published. She'd studied alien ecosystems for 10 years, written papers that changed how humanity understood cross-species behavior. None of that mattered now. Earth had lost the border wars 6 months ago. The Varkesh Empire had taken 3 colony worlds and a dozen space stations without breaking a sweat. Kate was payment. A hostage dressed up as a research consultant to make the arrangement look civilized. The Varkesh wanted human expertise but refused to admit they needed anything from the species they just defeated. So they took her. Told Earth's government it was a cultural exchange. Everyone knew the truth. Kate would probably never see home again. The inner door opened with a hiss. Commander Veldar stood waiting in the observation hall, and Kate's breath caught despite herself. She'd seen Varkesh before on video feeds, but nothing prepared you for meeting one in person. He was tall, easily 8 feet, his body composed of crystal formations that shifted colors in the light. 6 eyes arranged in a triangle pattern across his face, each one blinking in sequence as he looked her up and down. The Varkesh were beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful. Sure. Cold. Dangerous. You will document hatchling development, he said without preamble, his voice sounding like wind chimes made of broken glass. Master Trainer Gorath will oversee your access. You will not interfere with training protocols. You will not question methods. You are here to observe and record. Nothing more. Kate nodded, not trusting her voice. Her heart hammered in her chest. Do you understand? Veldar asked, leaning closer. She could see her reflection fractured in his crystalline surface. Yes, Commander, she managed. Good. He straightened. Gorath will explain your duties. Do not disappoint me, human. Disappointments are removed. That wasn't a metaphor. Kate understood perfectly. Fail and she'd be spaced. Or worse. Gorath emerged from the shadows at the far end of the hall like a nightmare-given form. Kate had to force herself not to step back. He was massive, towering even over Vel, his body thick with muscle beneath scales the color of dried blood. Reptilian. Ancient. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits, and when he opened his mouth to speak, she saw rows of serrated teeth designed for ripping meat from bone. Another weak blood scent to watch, Gorath rumbled, his voice so deep Kate felt it in her chest. How many of you will they send before they understand? Your kind is soft. Fragile. He circled her slowly, and Kate stood frozen like prey before a predator. You will stay in the shadows during training. Do not interfere. Do not speak unless spoken to. The hatchlings are weapons. They will be forged as such. Any disruption, any weakness you introduce will be corrected. Am I clear? Yes, Kate whispered. I did not hear you. Yes, sir, she said louder, hating how her voice shook. Gorath smiled, and it was the most terrible thing Kate had ever seen. Follow. She followed him through corridors that seemed to pulse with heat, down stairs that spiraled deeper into the asteroid's core. The temperature rose. The air grew thicker. Somewhere ahead she heard sounds. Roaring. Screeching. The crash of metal on metal. They emerged into the arena, and Kate's scientific mind tried to process what she was seeing even as her heart broke. The void drakes were magnificent and terrible. 15 hatchlings, each one the size of a small car, their scales black as the space between stars. Their eyes glowed like dying embers, red and orange and painful to look at directly. But they weren't magnificent by choice. They cowered in individual cages lining the arena walls, pressed against the bars as far from the center as they could get. Gorath's training method was immediate and brutal. He didn't explain. He didn't waste time on theory. He simply walked to a control panel and activated pain rods built into each cage. Electricity crackled through the metal. The hatchlings shrieked, a sound that rattled Kate's bones and made her want to cover her ears. But she didn't. She stood frozen, watching, documenting like she'd been told. Pain teaches obedience, Gorath explained, still not looking at her. His attention stayed fixed on the writhing creatures. Fear creates warriors. Comfort creates weakness. These beasts will learn to associate disobedience with suffering. When they are broken properly, they will kill on command without hesitation. He increased the voltage. The shrieks got louder. This is how you forge weapons. Kate documented everything from her assigned corner in the shadows. A small alcove had been carved into the arena wall where observation equipment was installed. A chair. A desk. A computer terminal. This was where she would spend her days. Watching torture. Recording it for Varkesh Science. Her hands shook as she typed. Her training screamed at her that this was wrong. The hatchlings were children. Just children. Traumatized, terrified children being tortured into weapons. Every instinct she had as a scientist, as someone who dedicated her life to understanding how creatures think and feel and bond, told her this method would create broken monsters, not warriors. But she was expendable. Powerless. A hostage pretending to be a consultant. That night, alone in her cramped quarters, Kate heard them crying. Low, mournful sounds that carried through the walls, sounds that shouldn't have been possible for creatures Gorath labeled as mindless beasts. They were grieving. Calling for family that would never answer. Suffering in isolation. Kate sat on her narrow bed, hands pressed over her ears, tears streaming down her face. She made a decision then, though she didn't fully understand it yet. Didn't know where it would lead or what it would cost. She would bear witness to their suffering. Document every moment of their pain. And perhaps, hidden in the shadows where she'd been told to stay, she could be more than just an observer. Perhaps she could be their hope. Kate started staying in the arena long after training sessions ended. She told herself it was for research purposes, that she needed to observe the hatchlings in their rest state to get complete behavioral data. That was a lie and she knew it. The truth was simpler and more painful. She couldn't stand to leave them alone in the dark. Gorath didn't care. She was beneath his notice, just another human scribbling notes in the shadows. He finished his training sessions and left without a backward glance, already planning the next day's tortures. To him, Kate was furniture. Invisible. Irrelevant. But the hatchlings noticed. They always noticed. At first, they pressed themselves against the far walls of their cages when the doors opened for rest periods, getting as far from everything as possible. From the pain. From the light. From any living thing that might hurt them again. Their massive bodies would curl tight, wings folded, eyes dim with exhaustion and fear. Kate didn't approach them. She understood prey behavior, understood that moving toward frightened creatures would only deepen their terror. So she simply sat in her shadowed corner, making herself small and unthreatening. She kept her breathing slow and quiet. Sometimes she hummed old songs her grandmother had taught her when she was a child. Melodies from Earth that meant nothing here, thousands of light years from home. But the sound was soft. Gentle. Different from the harsh commands and screaming that filled their days. 2 weeks passed like a nightmare on repeat. The training grew worse with each session. Gorath introduced starvation cycles, withholding food for days to make the hatchlings more aggressive and desperate. He built isolation chambers where individual drakes were locked in darkness so complete they couldn't see their own claws. He forced combat between siblings, making them fight each other for scraps of meat while he watched and took notes on which one showed the most killer instinct. Kate documented every horror in her reports. She sent encrypted messages back to Earth through the communication relay, knowing they would probably never be read. Earth had bigger problems than one scientist trapped in an alien facility. But she sent them anyway. Someone needed to witness what was happening here. Someone needed to remember that these creatures suffered. But during rest periods, when the torture paused and the hatchlings were released into the arena to recover, Kate sat in the shadows and hummed. It was all she could offer. All she was allowed to give. The smallest hatchling was the first to break pattern. Gorath called it number 7, refusing to give the creatures names because names implied personhood. Number 7 was the runt of the group, barely 3/4 the size of its siblings. It took the worst of the punishments because it was slower, weaker, easier to hurt. After a particularly brutal session where Gorath had withheld food for 3 days straight, number 7 collapsed near Kate's corner. The creature simply didn't have the energy left to retreat to the far wall like the others. It fell in a heap of black scales and labored breathing, its sides heaving with effort. Kate froze. Her scientific mind calculated distances and danger. The creature was still larger than her, probably weighed close to 1,000 pounds. Those claws could tear through metal. Those teeth could bite through bone. One swipe and she'd be dead before she could scream. Instead of attacking, the hatchling just watched her with one luminous eye, too exhausted to do anything but breathe. There was no aggression in that gaze. Just pain. And something that looked almost like curiosity. Kate's hand moved to her pocket before she could stop herself. She pulled out a ration bar, her own dinner, wrapped in silver foil. The sound made the hatchling's eye focus sharper. Slowly, moving like she was defusing a bomb, Kate unwrapped the bar and slid it across the floor. The hatchling sniffed it cautiously. Then its long tongue snaked out and grabbed the food, pulling it into its mouth. The creature devoured it in one bite, barely chewing. When it was gone, Number 7 looked at Kate again. And didn't leave. They sat there together in the shadows for the rest of the rest period. Kate humming. Number 7 breathing. A strange, fragile peace. The next rest period, Number 7 returned to her corner. This time it brought friends. Number 3, one of the larger hatchlings, came cautiously closer. Then Number 11, who Kate had noticed was always watching everything with sharp intelligence. By the end of the month, most of the hatchlings had started gravitating toward Kate's corner during rest periods. They would lie in a loose circle around her shadowed alcove, close enough to feel her presence but not crowding. Not threatening. Just existing together in the only peace they knew. Kate learned their personalities in those quiet hours. Number 7 was endlessly curious, always tilting its head to study her movements. Number 3 was protective, positioning itself between Kate and the arena entrance like a guardian. Number 11 was wickedly intelligent, solving problems and figuring out how the cage mechanisms worked. She started naming them in her private logs, encrypted files Gorith would never see. 7 became Nova, after the way its eyes glowed bright in darkness. 3 became Ash for its slightly grayer scales. 11 became Spark for the intelligence that lit behind its gaze. Gorith noticed their behavior changing. During training sessions, the hatchlings were distracted, less responsive to pain compliance. They would glance toward Kate's corner as if seeking something there. Reassurance, maybe. Hope. It made Gorith furious. He checked his equipment first, convinced the pain rods were malfunctioning. Then he reviewed feeding schedules, thinking maybe they were getting too much food. Finally, he installed cameras in the arena, covering every angle. When he reviewed the footage and saw Kate with the hatchlings during rest periods, his rage shook the entire facility. Guards reported hearing his roar 3 levels away. He stormed into Commander Veldhar's office with Kate in tow, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. "You contaminate my weapons," he snarled, throwing the video footage onto Veldhar's desk. "This human undermines everything. She makes them soft. Weak." Kate's blood ran cold as she watched herself on the screen, sitting peacefully while hatchlings rested around her. "What ends?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Gorith turned to her, and his smile was the cruelest thing she'd ever seen. "Their weakness," he said slowly. "And its source." Kate barely slept that night. She lay on her narrow bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the hatchlings moving in their cages below. Her mind kept replaying Goritha's words. Their weakness and its source. She was the source. She was the weakness he intended to eliminate. But how? Would he kill her in front of them? Make them watch to teach them that attachment meant loss? Or would he simply space her and tell the hatchlings nothing, letting them wonder why the human in the shadows never returned? Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The next day, Gorith ordered her to the arena for a special evaluation session. His tone was casual, almost friendly, which terrified Kate more than his usual hostility. She walked through the corridors on unsteady legs, her heart hammering so hard she felt sick. When she entered the arena, all 15 hatchlings were already there. Together. That was unusual. Gorith preferred to keep them isolated, breaking them individually. Seeing them all in one space should have been beautiful. Instead, it filled Kate with dread. She took her place in the shadows, pressing herself into her corner alcove. The hatchlings noticed her immediately. Nova's head turned, those luminous eyes finding her in the darkness. Relief flickered across the small drake's face. The others shifted, their bodies relaxing slightly at her presence. That tiny moment of comfort was about to be weaponized against them. The session started normally enough. Gorith barked commands in his harsh, guttural language. Mo. Turn. Attack the dummy. When responses were too slow or not aggressive enough, he activated the pain rods. Electricity crackled. The hatchlings flinched but obeyed. Kate noticed something immediately. The hatchlings kept glancing toward her corner, their eyes seeking her out in the shadows. seeking reassurance from the darkness where she hid. It was subtle, just quick looks, but it was there. They were checking to see if she was still present. Still safe. That's when Kate understood Goritha's plan with horrible clarity. He wasn't going to kill her. Not yet. He was going to make them fear her. He was going to associate her presence with pain through classical conditioning, the same way you could train a dog to fear a bell by ringing it before punishment. Every time they looked to her for comfort, he would hurt them. Their brains would eventually make the connection. Kate equals pain. Over time, they would learn to avoid her, to fear her presence instead of seeking it. It was brilliant and absolutely monstrous. For an hour, he tortured them while Kate was forced to watch from her corner, completely helpless. Every time a hatchling glanced her way, Gorith saw it and increased the voltage on the pain rods. The creatures shrieked and writhed. Several collapsed, their legs giving out from the electrical current coursing through their bodies. Nova took the worst of it. The smallest hatchling looked toward Kate more than the others, seeking the comfort that had helped it survive the past weeks. And every time those glowing eyes found her in the shadows, Gorith punished it. The little drake's cries cut through Kate like knives. Kate's nails drew blood from her palms as she clenched her fists. She wanted to scream, to run into the arena and throw herself between the hatchlings and their tormentor. But that would only make it worse. She was powerless. Expendable. A hostage pretending to be a scientist. "Please," she whispered, finally breaking the silence rule she'd followed for weeks. "They've learned. Stop." Gorith turned to her slowly, and his expression was triumphant. He'd been waiting for this. Waiting for her to break. "No," he said, his voice carrying easily across the arena. "They haven't learned the right lesson yet. They still look to you for comfort. This is unacceptable in weapons." He reached to his belt and pulled out a blade, long and serrated and cruel. Perhaps they need a stronger demonstration. Perhaps they need to understand that attachment is not just painful. It's lethal. He started walking toward Kate's corner with deliberate steps. Kate's breath stopped. Her body went cold. This wasn't conditioning anymore. This was execution. "Training obstacle," Gorith announced loudly to the hatchlings, gesturing at Kate with his blade. "Eliminate." Was a test. A horrible final test. Would they follow their trainer's command and kill the human? Or would they defy orders to protect her? Kate scrambled backward, but her alcove was small and there was nowhere to go. The wall pressed against her spine. Gorith was twice her size, covered in armor plating, armed with a weapon designed to kill. She was nothing. Just a human xenobiologist who'd made the fatal mistake of showing kindness to creatures being forged into weapons. The hatchling stood frozen. Kate could see the conflict in their glowing eyes. Weeks of brutal conditioning said obey the trainer. Weeks of gentle presence in the shadows said protect the human. Their bodies trembled with the weight of that impossible choice. Then Nova moved. The smallest hatchling, the runt, the one Gorith beat most frequently because it was too weak and too slow, stepped directly between Kate and the approaching trainer. Its wings spread wide despite the pain it must have caused its injured body, making itself as large as possible. A low growl rumbled from deep in its chest, a sound Kate had never heard from it before. A sound of defiance. Ash joined it, the protective one, taking position at Nova's flank. Then Spark, the intelligent one, moved to the other side. Then all 15 hatchlings surged forward, forming a living wall of obsidian scales and glowing eyes between Kate and Gorith. "Stand down." Gorith roared, activating his pain rod and pointing it at the hatchlings. They didn't stand down. When he tried to force through their line, they attacked. The fight was pure chaos. Gorith was a warrior, trained and experienced, his armor absorbing blows that would have killed an unprotected being. But 15 void drakes, even young ones, fighting as a coordinated pack was overwhelming. They moved together like they'd trained for this their entire lives. They protected each other, covering weak spots, striking in tandem. Nova went for his legs while Ash attacked high. Spark coordinated the others with low-frequency sounds. Enough. Kate's voice cut through the violence like a blade. And incredibly, impossibly, the hatchlings stopped. They didn't retreat, still guarding her in a protective circle, but they ceased their attack immediately at her command. Gorith lay on the ground, bleeding from multiple wounds, his armor cracked in a dozen places. He stared at Kate with pure hatred burning in his yellow eyes. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Heavy boots pounded in the corridors. Guards poured into the arena within seconds, weapons raised and ready. Kate stood surrounded by her hatchlings, all 15 of them breathing hard but standing firm, waiting for the end they all knew was coming. Commander Veldar arrived with a full security detail. 20 armed guards flooded into the arena, their weapons humming with charge ready to fire. The hatchlings tensed immediately, their bodies coiling like springs about to release. Kate felt Nova's muscles bunch beneath her hand, felt the vibration of a growl building in its chest. Kate placed both hands on Nova's scales, pressing gently. A touch that said, "Wait. Trust me. Not yet." And incredibly, they waited. All 15 hatchlings held their positions, aggressive but controlled, ready to fight but not attacking. Their eyes tracked every guard, every weapon, calculating threats and responses. But they didn't move. Commander Veldhar's crystalline body reflected the arena lights as he surveyed the scene. His 6 eyes moved independently, taking in the wounded Gorith, the defensive hatchlings, and Kate standing at the center of it all. "Explain this failure," Veldhar demanded, his voice cold as deep space. He looked down at Gorith, who was being helped to his feet by 2 guards. The human corrupted them. Gorith snarled, clutching his bleeding side. His armor was cracked, exposing the scales beneath. "She undermined my training. Made them weak. Turned weapons into worthless pets." He pointed at Kate with a clawed hand. "She should be executed for sabotage." Veldhar's 6 eyes fixed on Kate. The weight of that alien gaze made her want to shrink back, but she forced herself to stand straight. If she was going to die, she'd die with dignity. "Is this true?" Veldhar asked. "Did you sabotage the training program?" Kate took a breath, steadying herself. Her voice needed to be calm, confident. She had one chance to make her case, and everything depended on the next words out of her mouth. "I made them effective," she said clearly. Silence fell across the arena. Even the guards seemed to hold their breath. "Your trainer's methods are flawed," Kate continued, her voice steadier than she felt. "Void drakes evolved as pack hunters in their native environment. They're social creatures. Isolating them, breaking their bonds, torturing them, you're not creating warriors. You're creating damaged, inefficient tools that follow commands out of fear, not capability." "They attacked their trainer," Veldhar observed, gesturing at Gorith's wounds. "That is not discipline. That is chaos." "They attacked because he attacked their pack," Kate said. "He threatened me and they protected me the same way they protect each other. That's not weakness, Commander. That's loyalty. That's what makes a unit effective in real combat." She gestured to the hatchlings standing calm around her despite being surrounded by armed guards. "Do Gorith's isolated drakes respond to commands without paying compliance? Can he call them off mid-attack with just his voice? Mine do. Watch." Kate gave a soft whistle, 2 notes rising. The hatchlings immediately shifted into formation, moving as one organism. Nova to her right. Ash to her left. Spark and the others forming a defensive perimeter. Perfect coordination without a single pain rod, without a single shock. Veldhar's crystalline features were unreadable, but Kate saw his eyes narrow slightly. "Interest." She'd caught his attention. "Interesting," he said slowly, "but unproven. Obedience in controlled conditions means nothing. Combat effectiveness is what matters." Kate's heart pounded. This was the moment. The gamble that would either save them or condemn them. "Then test it," she said, praying she wasn't signing their death warrant. "Put my 15 against any 15 of Gorith's traditionally trained drakes. Combat trial. Let the results speak for themselves." Gorith laughed bitterly from where he stood, his yellow eyes gleaming with malice. "She condemns her pets to death. My drakes are twice their size, fully matured. This will be a massacre." He smiled. "I accept." 3 days later, the arena had been reconfigured for the trial. The space was larger, reinforced, with observation platforms installed around the perimeter. This wasn't just a training exercise anymore. This was a demonstration that would determine the future of the entire Void Drake program. Kate's 15 hatchlings stood on one side of the arena. They looked small compared to the 15 drakes Gorith had brought from another facility. His drakes were older, larger, their scales thicker and darker. They snarled and snapped at each other, aggressive and barely controlled even before the trial started. The Empress herself watched via holographic projection, her massive form shimmering above the arena. Kate had never seen the Empress before. She was beautiful and terrifying, her crystalline body containing entire galaxies within its depths. "Begin," the Empress commanded. The trial began. Gorith's drakes charged immediately, each one fighting as an individual. They were aggressive and fearless, attacking with raw power, but there was no coordination. Each drake sought to prove its own dominance, to be the one to make the kill. They got in each other's way, snapped at siblings who came too close, fought for position. Kate's hatchlings fought as a pack. Nova, the smallest, darted forward as bait, drawing 3 of the larger drakes toward the center. When they lunged, Ash and Spark hit them from the sides in a coordinated strike. The other hatchlings protected each other's blind spots, communicated through low-frequency vibrations Kate had learned to recognize, adapted their tactics mid-combat based on what was working. Within 10 minutes, half of Gortha's drakes were down, incapacitated but not killed. Kate's hatchlings fought with precision, not rage. Within 20 minutes, the trial was called. Continuing would have been a slaughter. Kate's hatchlings stood victorious, barely wounded, gathered protectively around her in the center of the arena. They weren't even breathing hard. The Empress's hologram leaned forward, galaxies swirling in her crystalline form. How did a human succeed where our best trainers failed? 6 months later, Kate stood in a redesigned training facility that looked nothing like Gortha's nightmare arena. The walls were painted in softer colors. Natural light filtered through skylights instead of harsh artificial glare. The cages were gone, replaced by open spaces where hatchlings could move freely. There were perches and climbing structures, water features, even areas designed for play. The Empress had agreed to Kate's terms after the trial, though it had taken 3 days of negotiation. Earth's government had been pressured to loan Kate's expertise indefinitely in exchange for reduced hostilities along the border. Kate had negotiated for more than just her own presence. No more isolation cages. No more pain rods. And her original 15 stayed with her, non-negotiable. Gorth had been reassigned to a frontier post on the edge of Varkesh territory, a humiliation for a master trainer. Kate tried not to feel satisfaction at that, but she'd be lying if she said it didn't bring her some peace. The creature who'd tortured those hatchlings was gone. Now Kate oversaw the entire Void Drake program with a team of human handlers she'd personally trained and requested from Earth. Tyler, a former Marine who'd worked with military dogs, handled the more aggressive adolescent drakes. Beth, an animal behaviorist who'd spent 20 years studying wolfpack dynamics, specialized in socialization and group behavior. Daniel, a veterinarian with the gentlest hands Kate had ever seen, provided medical care that surprised the Varkesh observers who'd never considered that healing could be done without causing additional pain. The original 15 were nearly full-grown now, massive and magnificent. Their scales gleamed like polished obsidian, their eyes burned with intelligence, and their bond with Kate was unbreakable. Nova was still the smallest of the group, but what it lacked in size it made up for in tactical brilliance. The little Drake had become the pack strategist, coordinating the others during training exercises with an intelligence that sometimes made Kate wonder if it was smarter than she was. Ash had grown into the role of combat leader, teaching younger Drakes proper fighting techniques with patience Kate wouldn't have believed possible. Spark had figured out how to open locked doors using its claws to manipulate the electronic panels, which was both impressive and problematic when Kate found it wandering the corridors at night looking for extra food. Commander Veldar visited regularly now, documenting everything for the Empress. Over the months, he'd transformed from a cold overseer into something almost like an ally. He was genuinely fascinated by the results, often staying for hours to observe training sessions and ask Kate detailed questions about human bonding methods. The new clutch is responding well, Veldar observed one afternoon, watching Kate work with 20 recently hatched drakes. They tumbled over each other in play, their movements clumsy but joyful. Such a different sight from Gortha's cowering, traumatized creatures. Because they're not being tortured from day one, Kate said, kneeling to scratch Nova behind its eye ridge. The massive drake rumbled contentedly, a sound like distant thunder. Happy drakes are effective drakes. Fear might create obedience but trust creates loyalty. And loyalty is what wins battles. Veldar's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Kate had learned meant he was processing something significant. The Empress wishes to expand the program. She has authorized 40 more human trainers to be brought from Earth. 500 new hatchlings will be assigned to your methods. Kate nodded slowly, her hand still resting on Nova's warm scales. Only if the conditions remain the same. No torture. No isolation. No pain rods. I won't train killers. I'll train warriors who choose to fight. Agreed, Veldar said. He paused, his crystalline body shifting colors in the light. The Empress also asked me to convey something to you. She finds it curious that humanity's greatest weakness, your emotional attachments, has proven to be a strategic advantage. Our species views emotion as a flaw to be controlled. You've demonstrated otherwise. Kate smiled, thinking about all the times humans had been called weak for caring. We don't see it as weakness, Commander. We call it family. And family makes you stronger, not weaker. That night, Kate sat in what used to be her shadowed corner in the old arena. The space had been converted into a comfortable observation room with cushioned chairs and wide windows. Through the reinforced glass, she watched her 15 original hatchlings settling in for sleep, arranged in their chosen pack formation with the younger drakes nestled safely in the center. Tyler found her there holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and sat down. "You changed everything, you know. For them. For us. Earth's government is calling you a hero." "We changed together," Kate said quietly, sipping the coffee. "I didn't do this alone. The hatchlings chose to trust. That's what made the difference." Outside, Nova lifted her massive head and made a soft trilling sound, the void drake equivalent of a goodnight call. The others responded in harmony, a chorus of rumbles and chirps that vibrated through the glass. Kate had been sent here as a hostage 6 months ago, expendable and powerless. Now she commanded the most effective combat unit the Varkesh Empire had ever produced. Not through fear or pain. Through trust and bond. She thought about Earth, about humanity's strange gift for making family from the unlikeliest companions. Thousands of years ago, humans had turned wolves into dogs, wildcats into purring companions, wild horses into trusted partners. Now, thousands of light years from home, a human had turned dragons from the void between stars into family. "We don't make weapons," Kate whispered, watching her hatchling sleep peacefully. "We make family." Nova's eye opened in the darkness, glowing softly like an ember. The massive drake looked directly at Kate through the window, and Kate could swear the creature understood every word. And family, Kate knew with absolute certainty, would burn entire stars to protect their own.